My name is Jan Wong. I'm a Canadian, third generation from China. My grandparents came here over 140 years ago. And I was a journalist, started as a business reporter, and I joined the Globe and Mail. It was my fourth newspaper in the 1980s. And they sent me to China to be their bureau chief. The Globe and Mail had a office in Beijing since 1959, I think. And my background is that I grew up in Montreal not speaking Chinese. At home we spoke English because my parents are both Canadian born. But I wanted to learn Chinese at university. So at McGill I majored in Chinese history. And on my summer vacation I decided to go to China by myself. It was very hard to get a visa. And I applied with a classmate who was white, and she was turned down and I was given a visa. And so I had to decide, am I going to go by myself? And because it was so hard to get a visa in those days, I thought I really should take advantage of this. And so I went by myself, not speaking Chinese, land there. They didn't know what to do with me. In those days they had two travel service companies. One was Guoji Luxing Show, which was for foreigners, and then they had Zhongguo Luxing Show, which was for Chinese. But I really was a very odd Chinese person who didn't speak Chinese, but I had to go. It was racial, so I had to go into the Chinese travel service for Chinese people, and it was a big struggle because everything was in Chinese, no interpreters. And eventually I kept asking them if I could study Chinese, because at McGill it was terrible. I was in the language lab, and Chinese is very difficult for an English speaker to learn because it's tonal. And eventually I ended up at Peking University, and I became the first Canadian to study there in the Cultural Revolution. It was 1972. So then I ended up studying there 1 year, just language. I finished McGill, then I went back again to China and took a 3-year history degree, Chinese history. And I lived with Chinese students, so that's when my Chinese got much better. And then I eventually became a reporter, and then I ended up at the Globe and Mail, and I was sent to China in late 1988. So I was there for the Tiananmen Massacre, the build-up, and the aftermath, which lasted a long time. I always go to the commemoration in Toronto of the Tiananmen Memorial on June 4th. One reason is I was an eyewitness, and even though journalists usually do not get involved, we just report. There's a big principle that you're not an advocate, you're not a cheerleader, you just observe and you try to be neutral. But in this case, I felt it's okay not to be neutral, because I did watch the Chinese government shoot down unarmed, peaceful civilians. And so I decided that I could do it even when I was still a reporter. I could still join into these commemorations. And I thought it was important to show up, because the Chinese government originally said no one died at Tiananmen Square. That was the initial report, and I had seen it with my own eyes. And then, of course, in my reporting in the days that followed, I'd gone to the hospital where the doctors told me about all the wounded and the dead that were brought in, and I interviewed students who were injured at Tiananmen Square. I had gone to the university campuses where they brought the dead bodies of students and had their memorial services like right away in the first day or two after. I had interviewed mothers of people who were killed at Tiananmen Square. So I felt like if you're going to have a big lie, if China's going to continue to say they were hooligans and first that no one died, secondly, oh well, they were bad people who were killed, then I have to do more than just be the reporter who was there, who I wrote a book about it, but that's not enough. So that's why I started going. I got pretty tired of going, but it's my classmates and my friends. Like one of my McGill classmates is Winnie Ng, and she's one of the real activists, and she would always call me and tell me, you have to come, and I was like, oh Winnie, I don't want to come anymore. Like I'm really tired, it's so many years, I don't want to go anymore. And as the time passed, it was harder and harder to get people to come out, and what really bothered me was that there's only Chinese people coming out. And the first year of Tiananmen, or during the massacre, I wasn't here, I was in China, but I heard that there were thousands of people in Toronto who marched. And then later on, it's like only Chinese people, and that really bothered me. Well, I noticed there was a low point maybe 15 years ago. I noticed at the beginning there were more non-Chinese showing up, but then pretty fast they just evaporated. And then I noticed there were some from mainland China, and there were, I think, people who were Falun Gong members. I'm not sure. And then with Hong Kong, suddenly there's a huge amount, a huge number of Hong Kong people and younger people. So I think in the last few years there's younger people, because they were the activists in the umbrella movement in Hong Kong. It's much more recent that the crackdown in Hong Kong has occurred. So, I mean, Tiananmen happened so many years ago, they weren't even born. So I think it's younger now, but it's still very much ethnic Chinese people. There are so many other things happening in the world, so I understand other people, what are you going to do? There's Ukraine, now there's Iran, there's problems in Africa. There's lots of things happening in the world, so it's understandable people don't have any more bandwidth to concentrate on other problems. And I also think that people look at China and they think, well, nothing's going to change. I mean, Xi Jinping is all about control and stability, and if anything, China has increased its grasp on people. It's much harder now to do anything in China. In COVID, people who spoke up about COVID were put in jail, and now there's so much detailed surveillance that I think ordinary people in China have just decided that as long as the economy's going well, and as long as I have food and I can travel and I have a decent place to live and I have a job, I'm just going to shut up. And that's understandable. So this happened ages ago. No, this is not new. So I think must be after, in the 90s. So that's like 25 years ago, more than 25 years ago, 30 years ago. In the 90s, I was supposed to go to some event hosted by the public television station TVO. They invited me, and I don't even remember what it was. Maybe it was just like a reception. And then I got a call saying, we don't want you to come because China objects to you. And I was really shocked that they were policing my attendance at an event sponsored by the taxpayers of Ontario, because it's a taxpayer-funded television station. And I remember going to my newspaper editor and saying, well, this is a story that China is trying to control who gets invited to a TVO reception. And they didn't understand the significance. They go, but we only have your word for it. And it's like, yeah, but I work for you. I'm a journalist. I get it if some stranger off the street says it, and so you need a second source, you need to corroborate it. I get it. But don't you see what's happening? We're in Toronto. I'm Canadian. Its TVO is government funded, and the Chinese are telling them not to invite me. And TVO listened to them because TVO wanted to do projects in China. So they didn't have the backbone to stand up to China. And I also experienced, so my book, Red China Blues, was optioned for a movie. And the person who optioned it is Alex Gibney, a very great filmmaker. He's won 2 Oscars. And he wanted to make a movie, a feature film, based on my life in China. And so I thought, wow, that would be really fun. Plus I get money, they're gonna pay me, but I get to do a movie. I think I wouldn't be in the movie. It would be about me. They'd have to hire actors. And then they hired a director named Wayne Wong, but spelled W-A-N-G. And he's an American director who did the Joy Luck Club, and he did a number of good movies. And he was in, I think, San Francisco, and I flew down, we met, and they hired a screenwriter, and it was all going great. And then Wayne Wang pulled out because he said he was afraid of China. He was afraid to do a story, a movie that talked about me going to China, learning Mandarin, blah, 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 and Tiananmen Square. That's what he was afraid of. So he backed off because he thought his films would be blackballed by China, which is what they do. If any actor or director angers them, they blacklist. That's a big market. This is very early on though. And he was afraid he wouldn't be able to do films in China. So instead of Red China Blues, which was my book, he decided to film Made in Manhattan starring Jennifer Lopez. That was what happened. And I thought, they're controlling even a Hollywood director. They're controlling people because as punishment, they dangle excommunication. This is what the Catholic Church used to do. If you were a heretic and you said something that went against the doctrine of the Catholic Church, they would excommunicate you. What does that mean? It means you're cut off completely from the Catholic Church, and you can't come to Mass, and when you die, you will go to hell. And that's what China was doing to, in my area, cultural workers, because that's where, they could control them. So those 2 little things, I never really thought about it since you asked me. But isn't that interesting? I find, and I'm not important, I'm just a journalist. They have a big responsibility because if they don't protect the democratic rights of people who live in their society, they are weakening their own democracy. It's not to help others, it's to help themselves. So if they allow interference in Canadian elections, they degrade the whole democratic system in Canada. It's not about being the nice guy, it's about taking care of your own yard, your own garden of democracy. You let the weeds come up here, it affects everything. And I think they don't necessarily see it. So some people will say, oh, that's not our problem. It's, among the Chinese. And the same thing happens in other ethnic groups like Indian groups. But it's wrong because you allow this perversion of our system, you suffer. And we have a balance because we need to trade with China, we need to have relations with China. But you can also, you don't have to be silent, and you can also prosecute, and you have to make sure that we have the legislation in place to go after people who try to distort our elections or try to put in people who are pro-China, and to the extent that it hurts. I mean, it's just wrong for any politician in Canada to be looking out for the interest of China. So how do we do this? Well, we have to have a strong media. We don't have a strong media anymore. It has to be exposed. We need investigative reporters. We don't have them anymore. So it's not a simple solution, but I think you need to strike a balance between relations with China and making sure nothing goes wrong internally, domestically. And it's I think Trudeau was really bad at understanding what to do. He was really not a good prime minister because I don't think he was informed or smart. And I think Carney is better. I think Carney is much more understanding of international pressures and how to balance it. It's not all trade and it's not all human rights. It's both, all at the same time. So we have a problem with teaching anyway, any history. I think we don't even teach properly about our history of Quebec relations and separatism. And as students are going through university, I think we don't ask them to read enough. You can't just sit in class for 2 or 3 hours a week and expect to learn enough. One of the things that is important to start right at the beginning in elementary school is start reading. You got to read and read and read, because you can't get enough just from the time that you have contact with your teacher. The education has to be ongoing and full-time, and you can't possibly learn everything that has happened in the world by sitting in a classroom and expecting your teacher to talk at you. The only way you can learn things is to keep reading. So I like 1984 by George Orwell. It takes 10 minutes to read. It's beautiful. It's great. I just read it because I spoke to a high school class. And I just read a new book about China called, I think it's called Breakneck Speed by Dan Wong. His name is Wong Dan, but not the Wong Dan who's the activist. That's a pretty good book. I think it's too long. I'm reading The Finest Hotel in Kabul, and that's by Lise Doucette. She's the chief correspondent of the BBC, and she wrote a book about this hotel in Afghanistan, and she tells the story of the various Afghan wars. And I'm reading a very interesting book about World War II and the resistance in Bordeaux, France. And it's interesting because they're all screwed up. Like the resistance is screwed up and the Nazis are screwed up. It's really good. I just read it. It's called Strangers, A Memoir of Marriage.